Hi everybody and welcome to Meconomist. So this video was originally going to be much more simple and tame, but that was before my girlfriend and I found ourselves in the middle of the Mojave Desert during the worst flash floods that the area has seen in over a decade. You see, my girlfriend and I had made plans months ago to spend a weekend in Joshua Tree, which is a national park in Southern California. October is the ideal time to be in the park because the weather's always warm, sunny, and it's not too hot. Our plan was to fly into Las Vegas on Friday, head to Joshua Tree super early Saturday morning, go hike into the wilderness, and spend the night backcountry camping. Then we would head back to Vegas on Sunday since I had a work conference at the Bellagio from Monday through Wednesday. Last time I was there, I rented a pretty boring Chrysler 200 from Enterprise, and this time I decided I wanted something a little bit more interesting. So I went on Turo and rented a nice little 2011 BMW 328i because I figured it would be the perfect car to cruise down the beautiful desert roads between Las Vegas and Joshua Tree. Also, I've never actually driven a BMW before, and I wanted to review one for my YouTube channel since it's something that I know there's probably a lot of overlap between the people that are interested in my channel and the people that might be interested in a BMW 3 Series. So I picked up the car on Friday and went to a parking lot to film the intro to my video, not knowing that in less than 24 hours I would be stuck on a remote part of the highway with flash floods raging both in front of me and behind me, blocking both ways. So this video is going to focus more on that story because I feel like it's a little bit more interesting and it actually helps to illustrate how I feel about this car. If you want to learn more about the car itself, I want to let you guys know that I am planning on posting the little bit of footage that I filmed as a more traditional review as a separate video. It'll probably just be my first impressions of the 2011 BMW 328i, and that'll be sort of a separate video for those people that just want a quick overview of the car itself. So of course I booked this car thinking that the weather would be 100% perfect the way it normally is in Joshua Tree this time of year. But as the day of our trip approached, there was one day in the entire 10-day forecast that had rain, and that was the day that we were going. We just kind of rolled our eyes though because we're very well traveled together and we're quite used to stuff like this. We've been through far worse than a little bit of rain. So Saturday morning comes and we head out around 5:30 a.m. while it's still pitch black outside. As the sun rose and we were driving south, the sky was uncharacteristically heavy with really low clouds and a pretty constant mist that occasionally turned into a drizzle. We thought this was actually pretty cool though because it made for some great atmospheric photos and video. As we got closer to the park, the rain started to get heavier, and when we got to the Amboy region of Southern California, it was pretty much a downpour. Eventually, we ended up in the last little valley before we got to 29 Palms, which is one of the towns with an entrance to Joshua Tree National Park. As soon as we got to the bottom of the valley, we came up to a massive, just kind of river flowing across the street. You couldn't see how deep it was at all, and it was carving a sort of mini canyon into the sand on either side of the road. Now, I lived through Hurricane Harvey, and I know that the #1 cause of death in that storm was from people driving into water that was either deeper or faster moving than they thought. The rule of thumb during Harvey was don't drown, turn around. Unfortunately, if we wanted to find a different route, it would probably add another 2 hours to our drive, and we couldn't even be sure if the other routes weren't flooded too. So we decided to see if we could wait it out until the water went down a little bit more. While we were waiting, we saw several lifted trucks, jeeps, and even a few normal-sized SUVs just plow through the flooding directly ahead of us. It gave us a little bit better of an idea of how deep the water was, but from what it looked like, the water was just about deep enough that with the ground clearance on the BMW, I wasn't really comfortable risking it. My biggest concern was that we would get broadsided by the fast-flowing water. That water would knock us off the road because even shallow water, if it's moving quickly enough and you have enough surface area that it's hitting, can be pretty powerful. A couple cars closer to our size came up behind us, but they all turned away. After waiting about 20 minutes or so, it seemed like the gushing water had subsided just a little bit, and we decided to risk it. I backed up a little and just gunned it through, praying that it wouldn't be a huge mistake. Massive amounts of spray shot up on either side, and the traction control was definitely kicking in. Our momentum dropped as we got to the deepest part of this river, and my heart just sank. I seriously felt kind of nauseous. But I kept my foot down, and we quickly came up to the other side. Now we could see that there were more of these rivers across the road, pretty much as far as the eye could see. Luckily, the next few were a little bit shallower, so we got through those fairly easily. Then we came up to one that was seriously like a slowly flowing lake across the entire highway. It didn't look too much deeper, but it was so freaking long. It was probably like 200 meters of water. I was already feeling a little bit queasy with anxiety, and it didn't help when some helpful guy in a lifted Jeep kind of slowed down as he passed us going the other way, looked down at our little BMW 3 Series, and he kind of shook his head and said, "I don't know about that." So we were basically stuck. We didn't want to go forward, but we didn't want to go back either because what we had been through was already hairy enough. Neither of us could figure out what to do. After a few minutes, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a convertible Mustang behind us plowing through that first river. I was like, Jesus, this guy is either totally screwed or we're just being total wimps. So we decided to watch the Mustang and see if it could make it through. Then we knew we could make it through as well. Again, it looked pretty hairy, I'm not gonna lie, but eventually the Mustang did pass us and plowed right into the 200-meter lake in front of us. No hesitation. The lake was clearly at least as deep as the first flooded section, and the back end of the Mustang was swerving quite a bit. The water was spraying so high that it covered the windshield of the Mustang, and you could tell that every now and then he was starting to hydroplane a little bit, but clearly the traction control was helping with that. It looked pretty sketchy, but he did eventually make it across. And that's when my girlfriend said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Okay, Noah, that Mustang just got through. Don't be such a wuss and just get us through. We just gotta go for it." So I took a deep breath and just gunned it through. I'm not gonna lie, I was probably more scared than my girlfriend because I could feel the traction control kicking in to stop us from hydroplaning or slipping off the road. And there were plenty of moments where the current nudged us a little bit off course at its deepest point. But we made it through that lake and through all the other water hazards all the way to 29 Palms. Our car was a muddy, dirty mess. Just like the Mustang, the water had sprayed all the way onto our windshield and all the way even onto the roof of the car. But we were safe, we had made it, we couldn't see any major damage to the car. I feel like we had accidentally completed like a Top Gear challenge, like buy a used rear-wheel drive sedan for $9,000 and meet up in the desert during a flash flood. Your challenge? Get to Joshua Tree without drowning. Once we got to the park, the weather was perfect, and the park was remarkably empty. Joshua Tree is one of the most popular parks in the country this time of year because the weather is usually so perfect, and it's a pretty easy drive from Los Angeles. We left Las Vegas so early because we had seen photos and videos of the long lines that there are trying to get into Joshua Tree National Park during the peak season, which is like October and the spring, that kind of area. The campgrounds were still all full because those are booked months in advance, and that's why we were going to camp in the backcountry because it's free and you don't have to make any reservation. You just hike out into the backcountry, into the wilderness, set up your tent, and you're good. As it turns out, the reason the park was so quiet was because the west entrance, which is the one you normally use when you're coming from LA, was blocked off by massive floods in the town of Joshua Tree. My girlfriend and I went into Joshua Tree, the town, for lunch, and there were multiple road closures due to massive amounts of mud and small boulders blocking the way. We spoke to a local, and she said that she'd been living there for over 10 years and had never seen anything like this. Somehow, despite all of this, Our little 2011 BMW 328i got us through it all. So for that reason alone, the BMW 328i gets high marks from me. The car was a real trooper and it far outperformed what I expected it to do. It's also a great car for long road trips without floods because it's pretty comfortable for a small vehicle and you can go a pretty long way without having to fill up with more gas. The straight six is buttery smooth and it's a delight to drive in sport mode. The sound system was also impressive and it drives like a real sports sedan should. Does it live up to the ultimate driving machine slogan that BMW has? I'm not sure. I still take a Porsche. But that's just me. I prefer more two-door sports cars as opposed to four-door sedans. The only other downsides were that the one that we had didn't have cruise control, and the trunk was just a bit smaller than I would have liked, and the back seats wouldn't fold down. We did fit everything we needed to in the car just fine, it just took a little bit more rearranging. Also, the cup holder got stuck in the closed position and it wouldn't open again, but that's just typical German cup holder engineering. Other than that, I think this is a great value car. You can pick up a used one for just under 10 grand and you'll get a ton of practicality and a decent amount of performance out of it. Like I said, BMWs still aren't really the car that I'm into personally. I still prefer small two-door sports cars, but for anyone that needs the room and the practicality, this is a fantastic choice. Plus, it might save you from drowning someday too. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys in the next one.